Who's our speaker today? Rosalba Alvarado is a PhD candidate in curriculum and instruction at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, where she holds a fellowship in diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. A Fulbright alumna from El Salvador, she earned a master's degree in educational counseling from UNICAES in 2020 and a master's degree in linguistics and TESOL from SIU or Southern Illinois University in 2022. With over a decade of EFL teaching experience, her research focuses on culturally responsive pedagogies for working Latin communities in the U.S. bilingualism, Spanish and English, cultural capital, and technology integration in higher education practices. And something that she forgot to include over there is that she's a former English Access Coordinator in the city of Ilobasco. So thank you so much, Rosalba, for accepting this invitation. We're very, very happy to have you here. I will stop sharing screen and I will give you space for you to start your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Video, for the welcoming words, and thank you everybody for having me here. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. To make sure that everybody sees what I'm seeing. All right, thank you again for the welcoming words. As Mr. Ovidio said, my name is Rosalba Alvarado, and in this opportunity, I'm going to share with you some strategies, some ideas on what is the importance of building rapport in the EFL classroom. But before starting, every time I had the opportunity to share with other colleagues or with my students, I like to start with a quote related to the topic. So the quote that I chose for today is this, and I want, let me just change my view option here for not blocking. The quote that I have for today is, teaching is about making connections both intellectually and emotionally. Throughout the development of this webinar, I would like you to think about this quote. It's creating connections about both intellectually and emotionally. And I'd like to emphasize the word emotionally there. Additionally, I would like to start by reading this other phrase. With a sense of adventure and curiosity, we can learn and experience more moment by moment. And this is with the idea of mindfulness. Everybody has very busy agendas, and we are sometimes taking care of one thing, and we have many other things in our mind or in our to-do agenda to take care. And that we sometimes forget about being here and being in the here and in the now. So by having the quote and this old phrase, I would like to invite you to try it as much as possible to be here and now, and in the sense of open your senses for adventuring, open your senses for curiosity, open your senses to learn new things, or for some of you, probably to refresh some things about your experience or about things that you have learned in the past. So my intent for this webinar is to build, is to touch base or to address some of these points. What is rapport and what does it mean in language learning? Which learning theories inform and support this idea of building rapport in the classroom? What are some considerations we need to have in terms of culture, in terms of social background? As many of the things, there are also challenges, but how can we overcome those challenges that we encounter when building rapport? And also, and most importantly, as part of this webinar, it's sharing strategies. Most of these strategies might be known. Some others might be new for you. The idea is just to refresh and to get a little bit more from these. All right. But before starting, Mr. Video, I would like to start with, I forgot to ask if you already have this full questions. If not, we can just do it as part of them in an action
um,
here.
yeah, maybe we can just discuss them because Zoom looks new to me today.
Okay.
There was an update some minutes before we started. So if we could just discuss them, that would be wonderful. Thank
All
you.
right. So the idea for this, we're going to have a couple of questions in between to ask how would you rate and what strategies and challenges and all that. So just to increase the participation, but stay with me there, and we're going to invite you to participate in upcoming questions. This was just for you to think. How would you rate your current understanding on building rapport in the EFL classroom? So have you heard about this word before? Or is this a word that is new for you? And just self-evaluate yourself there. We're not going to be sharing this now. The introduction. Building rapport in the EFL classroom is essential for creating a positive learning environment that supports student engagement and language acquisition. We all want our students to learn. We all want our students to be engaged in the classroom. But how do we do this? So rapport, it's an answer for how to start creating those relationships with the students and how this might look in different levels. Because probably here we might have teachers that have kids in the classroom. Some others are working with teenagers. Some others are working with university level. How does rapport looks in all the levels? Good news is that it is possible to build mutual trust and understanding, depending no matter the level we are working with. It's going to be more challenging sometimes, that for sure. But what is rapport? The definitions I'm going to show you here are definitions given by scholars that have explored this topic in depth. So it's research-based. And the first one is, rapport is the relationship of mutual trust and respect between teachers and students. And I have highlighted those words, mutual trust and respect between teachers and students. So it's a relationship that we establish with the students in the classroom so that we all respect, that we all trust, that we all can share our concerns, we all can share our achievements, and that we all can create a positive classroom atmosphere to can conduce to learning. Similarly, Senior defines rapport as the harmonious relationship between teachers and students, characterized by mutual understanding. Understanding, it's another important word. And shared commitment to learning objectives. Those are foundational for effective classroom interaction. A shared commitment, right? This is a two-way relationship. So it is a shared commitment, me as a teacher providing the content and providing the opportunities for the student to understand, for the student to learn, for the student to get all that knowledge that needs to get, but the student also to be there and completing all the responsibilities that they have as students too. Durnay and Murphy also describe rapport as the quality of the relationship between teachers and learners, characterized by mutual trust, respect, and empathy, which creates a positive emotional climate. And I have highlighted the word, the phrase positive emotional climate, because emotions are there and they are important. And if the emotions are not taken care, or if the emotions in the classroom are not considered as part of an important element of the class or the classroom, they are going to be there either preventing or helping learning to occur, and as well as motivation. So those are three important definitions about what rapport is. But how does or what does rapport means in the context of language learning? As we have discussed, a rapport is the relationship of mutual trust and understanding between teacher and students. So this plays a crucial role in reducing students' affective filters. I'm going to discuss about what affective filter is in the upcoming slides, but we are going to learn more about it. How does rapport differ between EFL classrooms and other educational settings? In EFL classroom, rapport often requires additional effort. Why? Because we have language barriers. Anxiety in students, whenever they are starting a class or a course, it's always there. But when they are learning or when they are going to an English class, there is an extra trigger over there. Why? Because they know that they are going to require to participate, but they have the extra trigger of how to communicate. They can be afraid of math, but they can voice their concerns. They can say, teacher, I don't understand this. Can you explain more? In their language, right? They can do it in Spanish. But whenever they are in English, they need to know how to say that they need extra help. So that's the extra challenge that we have in the EFL classrooms. And for instance, building that relationship of mutual trust between teachers and students is important. There is also different, we have different students with different backgrounds. And all of those things, the social and the cultural background is important on understanding the different needs that they have. And we also have those unique challenges that teachers face in connecting with the students sometimes because of the English proficiency. Why? Because in our class, we want our students to practice the language that they are learning, right? So sometimes part of our rules in the classroom will be all the interactions in the classroom need to be in English. So sometimes building that mutual connection can have that extra trigger of the language barrier. So as I said, what are the theoretical foundations? And here we are going to address the affective filter hypothesis. The affective filter hypothesis it's one of those theoretical or theories or frameworks that support like the science behind what we do, right? And that's important to understand. So the affective filter proposed by Krashen, he said that the emotions sometimes can be barriers that prevent effective language acquisition. The anxiety, the stress, those can be filters. So if a student is there in the classroom but is anxious about or is very stressed or afraid of saying something, or that's the feeling that they are experiencing throughout their class, the chances for them to learn what you are explaining are quite low because they have all of those filters, because their attention is not fully there. And what can be some of those factors influence this filter, preventing learning to happen? Motivation. Sometimes the students are not motivated to be in the classroom because of A or B reason. So how can we help the students be motivated? Self-confidence. Sometimes they feel they are at a certain level in a course that says certain level in English, but they don't feel that they have the level, so the self-confidence, or they feel that learning a second language or a foreign language is impossible for them. So, and anxiety. And we all are aware of this, either because we have been students or because we have been long enough with the students to learn that they are experiencing all of these factors in the classroom. This is a visual about what this theory looks like, or this hypothesis, sorry. And this hypothesis is like about like, think about an imaginary wall in the mind. And that wall, learning is happening here. You are explaining, you are giving very important information, but the student has this wall over here. So learning is not passing through. It's blocking the cognition to happen. And think about whenever you are anxious. You are anxious because you had to take an exam, for example. Are you fully aware of what is happening around you when you are anxious? Probably no. So that happens when students are anxious. So the affective filter deals with if students have all of these factors, like they are not motivated, they don't have the self-confidence, they are anxious, then learning is not going to happen, or it's going to take longer to happen. So this affective filter hypothesis, it's one of those foundations that help us answer why it is important to build rapport in the classroom. And underneath over here, we have some of those factors that can raise the affective filter. But I'm not going to go through all of this because time is money. The other theoretical foundation is the humanistic approaches. Implementing strategies that are person-centered or student-centered teaching strategies. We might be aware about this. In the past, education was about the teacher in front of the class lecturing, and the student, it was conceived as a passive learner. It was just sitting, taking notes. But in English, or whenever we are learning a second language or a foreign language, we need to establish strategies that are student-centered. Why? Because we want to maximize the students' talking time. We want to maximize the students interacting with the content. So we need to start establishing those person-centered teaching strategies. So Carl Rogers, he proposed that person-centered teaching, emphasizing on the psychological safety. If you feel anxious, if you feel not motivated, those are psychological triggers that are going to prevent your full attention in what is going on, being in the here and in the now that I explained earlier. So as part of my research studies, I have been doing a lot of reading on creating safe spaces and how or why this is very important in the classroom. Think about when you go to your home. You always have a place where you feel safe, where you feel relaxed, and where you can be yourself, right? So think about how that creating the safe spaces can benefit the students. That the classroom where they are learning, it's a safe space. It's a safe space for them to make mistakes whenever they want to say, or they have to say something in English. But they feel safe that nobody is going to laugh at them, that nobody is going to make fun of them because they make a mistake, or because or it's safe enough that nobody is going to laugh about others' backgrounds or other realities. So creating or establishing activities that are person-centered, humanistic, seeing the student as a human, as a whole, right? And seeing the student as a whole means I'm not going to just worry about giving you the content, but I'm also going to worry about everything that is going on with you. Because everything that is going on with you outside the classroom is going to be a trigger for you to be here now in my class and learn what I'm teaching to you. So part of our challenges, probably, or opportunities, is to create those safe spaces in the classroom. That our classroom is a place where students feel invited to come again. And then the teacher has to be a facilitator rather than an authority, rather than the one that is lecturing all the time. And we had to build trust by by caring about learners, showing empathy, and showing that positive regard, unconditional positive regard, that you care about them, that your role as a teacher doesn't just goes beyond just giving content, right? And then another important aspect is building a community in the classroom. Aim to create a community of learning where everybody helps everybody, so that the student that learns easily can also help those that takes a little long. That the students who are struggling can feel safe to request for help. So building that community of learning and interaction is another important key factor here. And seeing learning as a teaching and learning as a holistic process. And in this, it's like we had to give scores at the end, right? We had to send scores to the system. We had to show scores in order for students to pass. We had to sometimes give some tests or exams for them to get those numbers. But throughout the entire year that we are sometimes with the students, or throughout the course that we are with them, learning has to be holistic. So I care about, as I said before, I care about you as a human, and I care about you in what is going on outside the classroom, because those are triggers. So what learning opportunities can I get from learning about you, and learning how can I implement those things that are important to you in the learning process. And holistic in the sense of every single opportunity in the class, or every single time in the class, is a learning and a teaching opportunity for you and for the student. And then success, thinking about success, that depends on what happens inside the classroom, my content, what I'm teaching, but also between people in the classroom, how those relationships that we are building are triggering or are helping students to achieve that success. I can't now see now that I'm sharing if the people are asking questions. So Mr. Video, if you can help me with that, if anyone has questions throughout, I'll be happy to answer those, or those can be at the end too.
I'm keeping track of everything participants are adding there. Mostly comments, very interesting comments about your presentation.
All right, thank you. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna be trying to stop here and there to kind of see if people are asking questions, because yes, I cannot see throughout the sharing screen. But okay, coming back to what the topic is, why rapport matters in the EFL classroom. Research suggests that the rapport helps in EFL classroom with reducing anxiety, right? With the affective filter. The lower the filter is, the better, or the less blocks you are going to encounter to get to students and for students to learn. I'm not gonna read all of that because of times, but probably this is information that is gonna be available for you at the end. Students in the classroom with a strong rapport show increased willingness to take risks with the target language. So that's something important. The less anxious and the more secure students are in the classroom, the more willing they are gonna be to say things, even if they don't say it correct at the very beginning. So if you establish that as a class routine since the very beginning, and you say, see, we are all learning here. Me as a teacher is also learning. I don't have, and this is something from my personal experience, that this is something that I will say to my students. And if I have anyone that was my student in El Salvador, they might remember about that. And I said, see, I'm not a walking dictionary. Sometimes You are going to ask me a question, or you are going to ask me about a word that I might not know, but we are going to, I'm going to learn it. So making sure that mistakes are there, that you don't know everything, so that they also see you, especially in early levels. Sometimes the students see the teacher as the person that knows everything. And so we had to make sure that they understand that we are also human beings, that we are also learning, and that we are all learning from each other. And that those practices are going to help us with reducing that anxiety and lowering the affective load. And then by having a strong rapport, or that mutual relationship in the classroom is also going to enhance the student engagement and participation. And we all want that, right? We all want the students to participate, to whenever you pose the question, they raise their hands and they are eager to participate. And they are greater persistence. And because when students are more likely to engage in authentic communication when they feel emotionally safe. And that's another important thing. And emotions, remember the quotation, the quote at the very beginning, emotions, creating connections intellectually and emotionally. So the feelings are very important when we are addressing this topic here. Uh, it is also, and research proves that whenever there is that strong relationship between teachers and students, there is a better retention in terms of vocabulary and grammar. There is an increased motivation, so students are going to feel motivated to come back to your classes, either if they have a choice, because I know, like, most students go to courses to learn English. So they are not easy to keep. You have to keep them. You have to make sure that they come back. When you are in the classrooms, sometimes, and now especially, this is a course right now, right? The students have to take in the classes. But when students are going to courses, I guess I got a little bit lost with my thought over there. Classroom in the school, the students had to take the course no matter what. But whenever someone enrolled in a course, like an extensional course to learn English, motivation is important. And if they don't feel motivated, and if they don't feel invited to come back to your class, then that's going to be a challenge. So by having these mutual relationships, students are going to feel more motivated to come back. And there's going to be higher attendance rates and course completions. That's another gain that we will have. Another important thing to consider here, and in this, it's important to think what culture is. And we might think of culture like, oh, we are from the same country, we have the same culture. Yes and no. Because culture is a multi-level structure. We might share some things, but we might have some things that are different. And every time I discuss about, or I talk about culture, I like to represent it as the iceberg model. Why? Because the iceberg, you have that tip that you can see, but there's a monster that you cannot see underneath the water. We can see, like, we can definitely see the dress. We know about celebrations. We know about food. And normally when we talk about culture, those are the things that come to our mind, right? But culture goes beyond that. Culture goes beyond, or is related to values, to costumes, to roles, traditions, status, beliefs. And those vary from person to person. Those are going to vary from student to student. So when we think about culture in our context, El Salvador, we might think, oh, we all are from the same region, so we all share the same culture. Not necessarily, because from family to family, we can have different traditions, we can have different costumes. So understanding student culture, it's also it's trying in that process of building that rapport or that mutual relationship with the students. And we are going to touch base on these in the upcoming slides. So cultural considerations. Consider those cultural differences when you are building rapport. Which are the norms with how students perceive teacher and student relationship. And in this case, you also have to consider some students are introvert because of family traditions or because of their personality. Some others are extrovert. So one is for one is going to be easier to establish a conversation, to be more talkative, but for another it's going to be more challenging. And so going beyond in that is understanding what is the reason behind a specific behavior in a student, and that goes along with culture too. Understanding a student's cultural backgrounds, knowing a student cultural context. So, for instance, if you are teaching at a specific region, try to learn what is important to them. What are the festivals they celebrate? What are the traditions? What are some common or known stories and history of the region? What is important to them? Are they coming from a rural area? Are they coming from an urban area? And how that shapes the way you understand what is important to them. So building that trust. And later we're going to discover how can you incorporate it or understand their cultural backgrounds. And navigating the cultural sensitivity. Um, Get to know what is important to them, as I mentioned, and try to incorporate those activities that are relevant to them, but also being careful of how the topic or the activity that I am incorporating to my lesson might be sensitive for some students and not others. So be careful about that. You might know why that means, right? Like there are topics that it's sensitive to address in the classroom. So being careful about how to incorporate cultural aspects in the classroom, but not just leaving them aside, because culture it's is there, so we need to incorporate. So this is a question time, and in the chat I would like you to probably write a couple of what do you find most challenging about building rapport with students in the EFL classroom. Is it language barriers? Is it cultural differences? We haven't addressed about class sizes too, but this is an option here. Is it time? Because remember, we had to build a relationship, and a relationship is not built if we don't devote time, right? So is it limited class time? Or is it lack of students' participation? You might say, what do you think it is the most challenging, and add it in the chat.
So far we have language, lack of students' participation, culture. They also speak about the size of the classroom. Um, yeah, cultural differences,
Mhm.
self-esteem, insecurity. Some of the messages are going too fast. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
definitely
and
confidence.
and
I'm
there
seeing.
is a comment over here that says wonderful webinar. So interesting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, language barriers. Definitely. Yeah, language barriers, as I mentioned, is one of those that, yeah, because the students sometimes, and this I'm speaking from experience here when I was a student, and sometimes there was a very important topic and a topic that I was like, I would like to say something, but I don't know. Like I was translating here, but the speech was not coming. And sometimes they are eager, and so it's like I want to participate, but I have the language barrier. I don't know how to say this, and sometimes we have the rule in the class, no Spanish. So, but with this, I'm not saying that you are going to allow Spanish, if that's part of your rule, it's important to also encourage the students to practice, because sometimes the classroom is the only time where they can practice the language. Okay, thank you for your questions, for your responses there. And let me see if I can move to the next one. So how do we overcome those challenges? One of the challenges, it can be balancing the authority with the approachability. We still want to have some level of authority in the classroom as teacher, right? You are like the same as in the house. The parents are the ones that have the level of authority. So I had to respect them, and me as a student, I had to respect the teacher. But also, how do I establish that being approachable, like the students feel secure or feel safe or feel like, yeah, anything happen, I'm gonna go and talk to my teacher, and I know that the teacher is gonna be there to help me. So keeping those. So maintaining those clear boundaries is important, but also making sure that you are approachable. And with this, uh, you can do this by establishing clear rules at the very beginning of the class. And we are going to address that at the very last of this presentation on how can you do it. Rebuilding rapport after classroom issues. So anything happened in the classroom, a conflict, let's say two students were fighting, and that changes all the entire atmosphere of the classroom. How do you address those things? Do you just remain quiet? No, you had to openly address that situation, reflect on solutions, but it has to be a conversation, right? It doesn't have to be a lecturing. It doesn't have to be just like you did this, you did this, you did this, and the student just with the head down, right? No, it has to be a conversation. I need to identify what happened here and how can we solve that. So to build that positive relationship again. Connecting with resistant students. And this is going to be very important for those who are working with teenagers, teenagers. Most of us will agree that sometimes it is a beautiful level to work with, but a challenging one. Why? Because teenagers are going to many things. They can be very cheerful at the beginning of the day, and they can be crying or mad at the end. So, or it can also be just a factor of they are going through something in their outside the classroom, and that is triggering their behavior or their esteem in the classroom. So how do you connect with them? Make time and establish a one-on-one conversations. Try to learn what is going on with them and how can you help with your experience to overcome those concern, and make that say, I'm concerned about this X thing. How can I help you so that you are fully here in my class and that you are here learning and that you are here part of this community? Approach for different levels groups. This is important especially in the English context, English classroom context. You are always gonna find students that have different levels of proficiency, some that are more advanced than others. And sometimes that's a challenge, right? How do you keep your class in a way that the student that is at this higher level feels encouraged to keep learning, uh, without feeling that the other person that is at a lower level feeling left behind? And with this is the differentiated instruction. Try to have extra activities for students so that if they finish their task early, they can move forward to doing something different. So accommodating the class activities to different levels in a way that they can challenge themselves. But that's a whole other conversation that we might want to have another another webinar to talk about differentiated instruction and why that is important in the EFL classroom. And effective nonverbal communication, those are techniques that we need to have when we are using the body language, right? Visual aids, facial expressions, those help with creating or reducing that communication barrier that we can find in our students. And making students feel comfortable. Encourage them with phrases like, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. And that's the way they are going to start feeling comfortable since the very beginning of the class. Now we're going to move to the strategies. And with this, I have a couple of strategies here. And with that, we are going to try to be on time. Personalized learning activities. Use students' interests and experiences to create relevant tasks. And this is tying up with the what I mentioned. Try to understand what is relevant for them. What is relevant for them based on likes, or what is relevant for them based on their reality, their social and cultural background, and try to implement activities. Those can be easy activities. And in here, I share an experience. In the class, when I was teaching, I will add those speaking cards. So I will have a little card with a question that it was open. So it will be, what is your best memory, or what is your best childhood memory? And so students will wait and get up and mingle, and they will ask questions, answer those questions. So it was a chit chat time for them at the very beginning of the class. And those questions can be around those experiences, those interests. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite song? And questions or activities that are going to be relevant for them. Create a positive learning environment. And I will emphasize on the first one, learn and use the students' names correctly. Probably in El Salvador, the names, right? The challenge will be learning the names at a specific time. So research sometimes suggests that you had to learn the students' names within 2 weeks starting the year or starting the course. Because psychologically speaking, the change that you see in a student just by you referring to them with their name, it's enormous. So saying their names, learning their names, and showing, like, anytime you want them to participate, you name them, you call them by their name. Create a safe, show interest for their progress, and celebrate those small wins or improvements. Interactive teaching methods. Implement those think, pair, share activities, role-playing, projects, and task-based learning. But I want to emphasize on think, pair, and share, especially because this is very relevant in the EFL classroom. You pose a question that you want the students to participate or to say something. But sometimes we don't give a thinking time to students. So the idea is that you pose the question, either you have it written on the whiteboard or you have it on your presentation. You pose that question and you give some time for students to think. They are thinking just within themselves. Then, after that given time, you ask them to get in pairs and share. So they have had that chance to think and structure the response before being put in a group or in a pair to speak. And then the share can be within pairs, but it can also be in general. And just by implementing that specific activity, you are going to see students' level of anxiety going super down and feeling more comfortable to chit chat, to speak. That's what we want, right? An English class doesn't have to be quiet. It has to be students speaking most of the time. And then safe communication space, right? Creating a safe space where students feel safe to make mistakes, where students feel safe to say things. even if they are struggling how to say them, but they still are encouraged to or motivated to participate. And then active participation, implement classroom routines or rituals. And by this is like, sometimes if we just do voluntary participation, that can also be problematic. Why? Because if most of the time, if you do just raise your hand, if you like to say this, the people that are going to be raising their hands are the ones that feel more comfortable giving a response. So by creating or implementing other routines will be like, you do like a draft, like you have names in a box, and then you pick those papers, and the name that you get is the person that is encouraged to participate. So those all are other strategies that you might want to take into account. And then technology is very important. And if there is one of my students here, you might remember that I was known as the Kahootera teacher, you know, Kahoot. I will implement a lot of the Kahoot activities in the courses just to integrate technology, but also make learning more engaging. So there were like, no matter what course I was teaching, I will integrate Kahoot because it had like that facility for students to get engaged with it. So definitely integrate technology. There are different free apps that you can integrate for students to learn through technology too. Other recommendations: develop those classroom routines. At the beginning, establish those rules that you want students to follow, but make them being part of those, make students be part of those rule creations. And then be consistent and persistent, but also being approachable. That's what we would like, being in there for students. And develop those classroom routines. Coming back to the first one, I'm just looking at the time over here. Develop that classroom routine, like thinking about this activity, creating those icebreakers. You can always integrate cultural aspects at the beginning of the class. Topics that are not fully related to the content that you are going to develop, but are going to help them create that community of learning, creating that safe space for them to share as a family, which is a classroom, which is a community. Creating that routine of saying, okay, every class, either at the beginning or at the end, you are going to say something, all right? Share something about you, share something about what you have learned, and engage in that reflection. So creating those routines so that they know what to expect at the beginning and at the end of the class, for example. So some of those, these are some of the recommendations I have. And this is another question time that another question. Which of the following strategies do you believe are the most or effective for building rapport in the EFL classroom? As I said, probably some of these were not new for you. Some of these are refreshing, or some of them might be, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So please share on the chat which of those strategies do you find are more effective, or is the most effective in the classroom, or which one would you like to implement in the classroom? I'm gonna leave it here for a bit, and then I'm gonna see. And that's all I had. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it here, open the chat, and give the microphone to Mr. Ovidio.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It has been a very inspiring session. Because of the time, we will not send people into breakout rooms this time, but we might have one or, well, just one person sharing ideas on what will be the top one thing that you learned from the webinar today. And maybe that person can share it uh, in the chat, or open the microphone. Just remember to keep it very short because we're approaching 6:30 and you know what happens at 6:30. Um, what's the top one thing that you learned today from this webinar? Macario?
Yes, good evening. Uh, I liked how how the presenter started by emphasizing on the knowing, the being aware of the here and now, and as the essential condition or state to create miracles in the classroom. And along with that, previous knowledge, being aware of the previous experiences of the learners as to how that interferes in the here and now to reduce the anxiety, which is related to the future. So keeping the students in the here and now by being aware that previous experiences have occurred, this may be affecting. And finally, um, I like this sharing and caring. That reminds me of a book in the 80s whose title was that, Sharing and Caring in the Foreign Language. Thank you so much. Wonderful webinar.
Thank you so much, Macario. And I gotta say this, Macario has been very active today in the chat. I think he did his homework before joining the webinar. So thank you everybody for being here and for being part of the last webinar of the year. I will stop recording in just a minute before we go. Hold on. I would like to share screen again. Um, this is the part that we had to skip. Um, Mrs. Alvarado, thank you so much for taking the time. On behalf of the Teachers Up Initiative, we want to say thank you for preparing. Thank you for accepting the invitation and for sharing a little bit of your knowledge with this great family of teachers in El Salvador. We want to present you with this certificate of appreciation. As I always say, this is very little compared to all the effort that you put into having this ready. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I hope at least a little bit of what I share stays with you and you put that in your teaching toolbox. It was a
Well,
pleasure.
I'm pretty sure that we are going to put into practice that in our in our future lessons. So thank you so much.